Okay, this is part 5 in our ongoing 6-part series on Is This My Problem? And this next statement might be one that's hard for you to believe, but I think it's one that's true, and that is this. Many Christians are not actually led by the Holy Spirit as often as they'd like to think. In fact, what's leading them is a guilty conscience. See, they'll say yes to almost anything that comes their way, not because God is asking them to, but because they'd feel bad if they said no. Over time, guilt will become a substitute for obedience in your life and mine, and it is very hard to tell the difference between the two. Guilt-driven faith will always sound like this. If I don't do this, well, I must be a selfish person. If I say no, I'm not very loving. If I step back from this, am I actually failing God? Guys, guilt will be a terrible guide in your life, and it will always push you into things that God is not actually trying to lead you into. Look, Jesus helped people constantly. There's no mistaking that, right? But he never helped compulsively. And there's a big difference between those two things. He would walk away from crowds. He left needs unmet. He rested while people waited. This wasn't because he didn't care. It was because his primary concern was always the will of the Father first. Guilt says, look, you have to do this. Jesus simply says, hey, follow me. Guilt will keep you busy, okay? There's no doubt about that, but you'll also not be very fruitful in your life. It'll keep you exhausted and never obedient. So you can do a great many good things in your life and still miss many of the things that God is actually leading you into. That's how people get burned out in the name of faith and in love. So ask yourself this: when you're presented with opportunities to serve, their struggles, problems come your way, and you're trying to determine, should I jump in? Should I help with this? Ask this question: if no one would be disappointed in me if I said no, would I still say yes? See, that question will help you determine, and that will reveal who's leading in your life. Is it God? Or is it a guilty conscience? So before committing, stop and pray, okay? Did God actually ask me to do this? And what reasons do I have to believe that? Or am I just trying to relieve a guilty conscience? All right, this is part 6 and the final video in our series on Is This My Problem? And for today, I want to talk about this idea, living available without becoming overwhelmed. You know, the goal of this series was never to get us to care less or somehow become more selfish in our life. But the truth is, there will always be far more needs that surround you and me than what we can possibly hope to care for on our own. And if we try to respond to all of them, we're not going to become more loving. And we're certainly not going to become more Christ-like in our life. We're just going to become more exhausted. Faith was never meant to be about carrying everything in your life. It was meant to be about listening, responding to what God is actually calling us to do. That's been the theme actually throughout this entire series. Have you stopped and taken time to pray before you decided to carry this burden or to rescue that person from that struggle? Being available doesn't mean being on call for every need. It doesn't mean saying yes to everything that demands your attention in life. And it doesn't mean carrying what God is not trying to assign to you. Availability means that your heart is open, but your life is ordered. That's the way that Jesus lived. He was interruptible, but he was never controlled. He was compassionate, not compulsive. He was present, but never pressured. What's healthy availability look like for you and me? Well, it's going to sound a certain way, okay? For starters, it's going to say, God, if you ask me to step in, then I will, gladly. If you don't, then I'm at peace stepping back. I'm willing, but I'm not going to be driven by guilt or fear. This kind of faith listens first and then moves. It doesn't rush, it doesn't panic, and it doesn't need to fix everything to feel faithful. Living available doesn't mean being everything for everyone. It means being faithful to the few things that God has actually entrusted to you. As situations come your way, learn to pray. Pray this: God, are you asking me to step into this situation, this struggle, this problem, this need? Or are you inviting me instead to trust you with it? That prayer will keep your heart open and available without taking on weight that God never placed on you. You don't need to manage outcomes. You don't need to control everything. You just need to follow His leading. You don't have to carry everything to be faithful. Remember that. Remember this. You don't have to fix everything to be loving. And you don't have to say yes to everything to follow Jesus. Walk available, walk attentive, but walk free. That's the invitation of this series.